Hey guys, welcome to It's a Classic. My name is Tyler, my co host is Elizabeth, and we both love movies. See, in our family, when you like a movie, we say it's a classic. So even if a movie is designated as a classic, like Wizard of Oz or Casablanca, or it's my dad's favorite, like Three Amigos or Ace Ventura, doesn't matter. We say it's a classic. So join us to hear why we think it's a classic. Well, hi, Mom. It's good to
Hi,
talk to you
Tyler.
again.
Yes, it's good to see you.
So, last week we did the movie 2012, directed by Roland Emmerich, and he has a pretty decent track record of disaster movies. Uh, he also directed Independence Day with Will Smith and Randy Quaid.
Yes.
And the reason I mentioned Randy Quaid is because his brother Dennis Quaid is in this movie The Day After Tomorrow.
I love both of them for different reasons. You know what I mean? Like, they both bring very different things to the acting table, and
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
say I like one more than the other. You know what I mean? Okay. We also have to mention the other star of the movie, who is.
Oh, Donnie Darko. Sorry, Jake Gyllenhaal, as most people know him.
I know in this movie he looks most like Donnie Darko because I believe it's pretty close to the same time. So it's Jake Gyllenhaal, but very young. So sweet. I think that that Donnie Darko was my intro into Jake Gyllenhaal. But okay, so I do research on these movies, right? Because of the
Yep,
disaster freak in me. But while
yep.
I was doing the research, I ran across one of my favorite little reels, which is a movie, or it's like they're interviewing Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal, and they ask about like what does it feel like coming back, years later and working together? And Rachel's like, what? Like, I've never worked with him before. And Dennis Quaid's just sitting back, being his cool, calm self. And he's like, I was your father. And then Jake
And
Gyllenhaal's like, he realizes and he's like, oh. It's so funny.
I love that. I do love that video. I don't understand how you can forget who you've worked with, because it's not like it's green screened in. Like they were together, but he was young. Um,
They were
yeah.
together for two very short, like, pieces. You know what I mean? It probably was very quick, and look at all the time that's passed since then, you know what I mean? So I'm sure he just completely spaced it off.
Um. Well, I kind of. I mean, it's The Day After Tomorrow. It came out in 2004. I believe Johnny Darko came out in like 2000, 2001, something like that. So it was pretty close. Um. No, the thing I wanted to mention, because I mean, it kind of fits in before the movie starts, is uh the creators of a show that we both have seen and enjoy. Uh, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, I believe, who created South Park.
Yeah. Okay, what do they have to do with any of
Okay,
this? No, please
so
don't tell me.
they no, 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 they're not, but they almost were. They got a copy of this movie script before it was released, like while they were in production. Somehow, I don't know
Sure.
how those guys get what they get, but um, and so no, so they planned on making the exact same movie, word for word, everything in it, except with like puppets and their own like drawing South Park style stuff. And then they were going to
I did.
release it the exact same day.
Yes. That would have been the most amazing thing.
The their lawyer told them, do not do that. No, that'll be a disaster. So instead, they released an episode that I remember in season 9. I think it was episode 8, called 2 Days Before the Day After Tomorrow. Do you remember that one?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
And that episode is because they couldn't put the movie out.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that.
I would love
This is
more.
hilarious. Oh gosh. Okay, so before I call out or say anything that could be taken in the negative, please understand that this is one of my favorite all-time disaster movies because they don't play around. They get to it immediately. They're just like, this is pure adrenaline Russian disaster movie and I love it. This is my jam. However, this is hilarious to me. So, all of this next information is a shout out to at Cinema Shorts. This comes directly from you. I'm not taking any credit on this plagiarism whatsoever. So, there you go. There is my citation. Okay, excuse me. So, he notes that 3 things about this movie. First, uh 20th Century Fox, the production company, right? They invited some scientists in to test some of these scientific facts about theories, sorry, about this movie. And they basically said, no, thank you. It called it entertaining nonsense and walked away. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. They also tried to pull NASA into the mix, and NASA was like, we're not backing any of this up, and they also prohibited their employees from doing the same. If they
Yep.
had to they had to pull back on that one for obvious reasons, like First Amendment and things like that. But yeah, NASA was very like line in the sand. No. And then the last thing he mentioned was there's a lot of this movie, if you haven't seen this movie, there's a good chunk of
It
it
came out
that's
20
filmed at
years
the,
ago.
well, there may be a random that hasn't seen it.
Fair enough.
Sorry, watch this movie. Anyway, there's scenes in the iconic New York Library. That's this little tiny building housed around like gigantic buildings, and it's a very iconic and trademark. Part of this is the lions that are out in front of that. Those are trademarked. So if you use them in a movie, you have to pay the fee that comes along with it. And 20th Century
Weird.
Fox was like, nah, no thanks. We're just going to replace those lions with lampposts and call it good. And that's what they
I was gonna
did.
say, recognize the library. Never saw any lions, so
Lamps, they're lamps. They did not want to pay that fee. So they were just like, no, thank you. And CGI'd them out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's that part of it. I'll get to some other
So
tidbits as we go along. So there's just those cute little things.
awesome.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I saw the same thing. And yeah, I think that's great that they can do that, and they can just say, well, I mean, it's kind of good, kind of not. Like, you can tell what
Yeah.
library they're at. If you know New York City, if you know the area, you know where they are exactly.
If you know anything about history at all, that is a iconic building in New York.
When you mentioned it going straight into the action, the first scene of this movie, they do they do this like 2 or 3 minute shot of this gigantic ice shelf in Antarctica, all of which is CGI, which was pretty flawless. I really liked it. But that is showing the Larsen B ice shelf. which is a
See,
real ice shelf.
yeah, I want to mention something really quick. Around that time, CGI was really starting to get like creative. So this CGI team that they had for this film, they fired 6 months before production and had it all redone. It was done so well that the New York City flood scene that we're going to be coming up to, that
Yep.
CGI right there was done down to the millimeter. Like it's so perfect. You know what I mean? Like you can't tell that that's not New York City when you look at it. And so
Yeah.
some of that same GI effect was obviously used in the part that you're talking about too, with the ice fell like that into that bottomless like cavern. Frightening, but so
Yep.
awesome and realistic. It was amazing. That team was amazing. I can't remember what the reasoning that they said the reasoning behind it, but they just weren't satisfied with the production level. They wanted it to be more realistic.
Well,
So
they ended up doing a great job because it was fantastic.
yeah.
Going into this this ice shelf right at the very beginning. Well, first scene of this movie, they are Dennis Quaid and his team are getting ice cores, um, which of course they can use to study different events and climate events throughout time. Um, and a huge section of that breaks off. Um, and a wonderful impractical jumping scene where Dennis Quaid barely makes it over with nothing in his hands, and then once he has all these heavy ice cores, he makes it over. So, and then he falls with nothing in his hands, and then magically has an ice pick. But aside from that, um,
That is the athleticism of that Dennis Quaid. He's just that kind of guy.
yeah. But aside from that, so he later is giving a he's giving a conference to a bunch of different people. The vice president is there, and he's talking about the severity of this, and they're not really buying it. And he said, well, he said the last piece of ice shelf to break off was the side of Rhode Island, and I think that that's pretty significant. This is based off of an actual event in between 2002 and 2003, where um, an area of a section of the Larsen B ice shelf broke off that was approximately the size of Rhode Island. So I'm glad that they put that in there.
Yes. Also, I would like to add because there are fear mongers out there and they'll use movies like this to like build people up into a crazy frenzy. So let me just dispel those rumors right now because I do my research. So the event that he's speaking on is an actual event. So, and he's actually
Mhm.
showing charts of the actual event. So basically what it's called is AMOC, or Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulations, or ocean currents. That's the Atlantic Ocean current. So there you go. That's
Yep.
basically what they're talking about. And they just get all fancy with it. But he also says in different places in the movies about a desalination, which basically is saying that so much fresh water will go into the ocean that it'll desalt the ocean. But basically, it means that there'll be more fresh water in the ocean, and that the salt, because that ocean current carries heat and salt around the Atlantic Ocean, and by disrupting that,
Mhm.
it could potentially cause a fail in that whole circulation. Okay, so I was a literary analysis major in my undergrad. So when they use specific or when certain words are used, they just ring a bell to me when I'm trying to prove something and they're using words like woulda, coulda, shoulda, maybe, sorta, could. Like that to me is like, okay, this is somebody's definite opinion. There's no solid evidence. And so
Yep.
what I looked for is a lot of people say global warming could cause this to occur. I say that look more at like cloud seeding and things like that. That'll definitely cause changes in the weather, right? But as far as the ocean currents, I went to the NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, who their actual
Yep.
job is to deal with the ocean and the currents. So I go to the source, and their last article that they had on this very thing was June of this year, so just a few months ago. And I'll read it verbatim. Oh, jeez. Okay. So it says, while research shows it's a weakening over the past century, the weakening, I think they mean the rotation of the spin or whatever, uh, whether or not it will continue to slow or stop circulating completely remains uncertain. If the NOMAC,
Yep.
which I just spoke on, that circulation, does continue to slow down, it could have far-reaching climate impacts. For example, if the planet continues to warm, fresh water from melting ice poles would shift the rain belt in South Africa, causing droughts for millions of people, and it would cause sea levels to rise across the East Coast. Now that could occur. Like we do see things like um, the storms in Florida and the coastlines eroding and things like that do happen, but I don't think it would cause a supercell storm that creates an ice age. My opinion, just saying. Just saying. That's why I love
Well,
this film. Because my imagination could be like, but could it? It could. Because look.
so okay, yeah. One of the things that you and I are kind of calling this month with all these movies is Disaster Month. It could also be called a couple different things. It could be called um, Scientific Inaccuracy Month, and it could also be called the top 5 most inaccurate scientific movies ever made. So this is one of
Yes.
them.
This is one of them, and that's why
And
I love it.
yeah, this movie is not we're not watching it for the accuracy of science. Just like
No.
we didn't watch 2012 to see what we could learn. Although, thanks to you, we do learn quite a bit. One of my favorite things so far is the research that you put in, and I really like that. And I don't know, like there are some movies that's there is no research to put into it. Okay, so there's a couple different times in this movie that, because it is about weather, that weather is shown on the TV. And there's a couple of them that I wanted to point out because pretty soon after this, because as kind of goes a little bit forward in time and things are starting to happen weather-wise, um, it shows a hurricane in Hawaii. And there's a news story on that. The footage of that hurricane was from 1992. Hurricane Iniki, and I might be pronouncing that wrong. I apologize. That was actually shot by Roland Emmerich's assistant back in '92, and just had the footage, and he renamed it himself after his wife, who I think had passed away. But so that hurricane footage for that is real footage from a hurricane that went through Hawaii in '92, which I thought was very cool. Um, and
Wild.
then after some turbulence and stuff, the FAA goes through and they do a flight ban throughout the U.S. and on the news it says, unfortunately there are 2 planes that were taken down by turbulence, and it shows the
Yeah.
wreckage. And I don't know if you noticed
Yeah.
how grainy that footage was, but that wreckage, so that wreckage was Long Island from 1990. So that was real footage of a plane crash. which I really like that. And then the blizzard that it shows in the UK, that is footage from a news report in 2002, blizzards in England. So I like that they threw in some real world things, because if we're not going to get accuracy with science, at least we'll get it through the weather. And then and
It
then
never
the
happens.
right.
Oh
So
my
and then the other
goodness.
thing, so MTV used to take different clips from movies and put awards behind them, for best action sequence, and
Yeah.
they stopped doing that. But the last scene to win that award from MTV was the tornado scene in Los Angeles from this movie. And that scene is fantastic.
Remember when I was speaking about CGI? That entire
Yeah,
scene is CGI. Literally the entire
of course it
scene. Like
is.
there's nothing real. It's all computer generated. I watched the video that I was watching about these CGI stuff that they were doing. It's great that they're doing it, but they're just basically superimposing, like even the helicopter is CGI. It is a pretty great scene though. You got to admit, like
Yeah.
that would be pretty crazy if the Hollywood sign just got ripped, like whoop, gone.
Oh yeah. 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 No, that scene was really cool.
That's
There's different
that
parts of
is
this
wild.
movie that stand out. Just in my mind, just was always just the emotional, like, oh my goodness, when the janitor opened up the door and the
Yeah,
entire side of the building is gone, like that scene, and it
yeah.
pans out, like that scene is really cool, super scary, and really impressively done. Well, I was just gonna say,
Right, yeah,
in order
that too.
for a tornado, for those of you guys who have not encountered tornadoes, I've been through a couple of them. I know you have, Mom. I was roofing a house,
I have.
and I was outside in a tornado that was like 2 blocks away. The lady who was roofing her house, she was going to sell her house, and she said, "You're dirty, and I don't want you to make any. I don't want you to dirty any of my house. So you're going to have to stay outside." And this was before I could drive, and so I didn't have a car to sit in, and yeah, my brother and I hugged a tree while a tornado was going on like 2 blocks away. And that was probably the scariest moment of my life. And then I found out that woman never actually sold her house. So, yeah. Anyway, tornadoes are crazy. And,
I can't even right now. What
ah,
in the world?
they're crazy.
That's insane. That's
Um,
probably one of the crazier stories you've ever told me. Holy cow, what else am I
yeah,
going to learn on this podcast?
I don't know. So the other thing about that, though, is that it is wildly inaccurate, because for a tornado, like I said, they're crazy. Um, for a tornado to do that much destruction to a building, it would have to be, the speeds of it would have to be, F5 level, or F4 maybe, but that entire building would be destroyed, because it would have to build up speed before it got there, not when it was there. So that whole building would have been gone. But I don't know, the dissolve of it going back into the clouds was really cool. So I'll let it slide
It
this
was
time.
beautifully peaceful. It was such a peaceful part of the whole thing. Just
It
oh,
was. Plus the music, yeah.
beautiful. That was a
Um,
beautiful scene. Award winning. Just yeah. Well, we could talk about the helicopter crash. Well, there was a few things about that scene. All I was thinking was just like the amount of immediate deep freeze. I feel like that the guy would have probably already been dead before the helicopter hit the ground, because he's a lot softer than metal. You know what I'm saying there?
So
And that's
yeah, so I got a couple things. One,
entertaining. It wasn't
um,
realistic. Totally great and entertaining. I loved it, but
yeah. So okay, it dropping to there's so much wrong with this movie. Okay.
that's why NASA they were like,
I know.
nope.
Helicopters and airplanes don't use the same gas that's in our car, right?
Right.
There's avgas, which is a little bit different, but that is aviation fuel, right? That fuel freezes at -80 to -100 Fahrenheit. Um, jet fuel, obviously, on bigger airplanes and larger helicopters like that, have a maximum freezing point of -40 degrees Fahrenheit. So when they said it was -150, um, that's not when fuel freezes. So they're wrong on that point.
When
Do
do
not
people
freeze.
freeze? We don't.
Okay,
Not like that.
in Siberia, there's a part of Siberia that is the record coldest part of the world, and their
Yes.
record cold was -97 Fahrenheit.
That's pretty
People were
cold.
fine. Yeah, people were
I
fine.
mean, where I live in this part of the country, we've had -50. I was walking around in it. I was okay. My skin didn't like
Yeah.
crystallize or anything like that. So I was, you know what I
Well,
mean?
and of course
I
you
don't
have to
know.
put
It
in the
just
wind chill. I mean, it's been -60, -70 in Minnesota with the wind chill.
with the
And
wind
wind
chill,
chill is
yeah.
what would give you the frostbite, but you get frostbite, not your entire body freezing.
Crystallize.
Um,
You don't crystallize.
right. So but the image of the guy freezing as he's opening a helicopter, that's another image that'll just be like burned into my head. The in that scene with the flooding, that gigantic wave hits the Statue of Liberty, right? Hits Liberty Island. And I saw someone had done the math on the height of that wave based on the height of the Statue of Liberty, and the island and everything. And that wave would have had to have been 280 feet high. None of that matters because the metal skin, as it were, over the Statue of Liberty is 3/32 of an inch, which is the thickness of two pennies put together. So none of that. It would have been ripped to shreds. I mean, I get
No.
it. Since this movie has been made, there have been so many natural
Mm.
disasters that have happened in this world that have disproven everything in this movie. There have been larger waves hitting buildings, and they're fine. There have been, deeper freezes.
The
People are
box.
fine. They have.
There's actually a gentleman that is alive right now to this day who survived the largest tsunami to hit. But there was also the Fukushima, the tsunami
Yep.
that came, that's the Boxing Day that killed 200,000 people, that caused so much. Yeah, so all of those were bigger than what hit New York.
So with all that rain, I thought it was pretty interesting. They show a bunch of people crossing into the Mexican border, and
Yeah.
that was actually a bunch of actors and extras crossing the Rio Grande into Mexico. That like they actually filmed people running through the river into Mexico, which is I think really cool. They could have picked any river, but they're like, no.
What? We're just invading
Mm.
Mexico for no reason at all.
Okay, let's talk about invasion real quick. At the end of the movie, there's a bunch of Black Hawk helicopters that are going through and rescuing people in New York. So the U.S. Army loaned a few UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, and they were filming this in Montreal, and the Canadian authorities had to reassure people that the U.S. was not invading them. Because all of a sudden, Black Hawk helicopters from the U.S. started... Isn't that hilarious?
Oh my god.
Okay, the other thing, that guy, the homeless gentleman,
Yeah.
when I see a shot of him walking through with his dog, there's a shot in the movie Armageddon, if anyone's seen it.
I was
And there
thinking the
is
exact same thing.
man with a dog going through, and it's the exact same thing, like this same vibe from them. It's everything's the same, and
Yeah.
except there's inflatable Godzillas and there's asteroids instead of water, but it's like it's the exact same person. Not really, but like
Same
it's the
vibe.
same. It's the same guy. It's the same dog. It's the same situation.
Yeah.
Completely different
Yeah.
movies.
I always confuse the two. Also, I'm always like, so when's the meteor gonna hit? Oh wait, there's no meteors. It's a freeze. That's
Right?
And how does the New York Library have the first copy of the Gutenberg? I thought that would be at like the Smithsonian or something. Like, where is that actually
Yeah, or
kept?
the Library of Congress or something.
Yeah, you'd think like they would have it, and plus, it's just a freeze. Like things will thaw out. It'll be okay, eventually.
Yeah, it's also super dumb because the timeline between the ice age that they're experiencing versus an actual ice age, it would have been, I don't know, like thousands of years between, and it's just like, stay warm for a couple days and you'll be fine. It's like, okay, well, pick a lane. Is this disastrous ice age, or is it like a standard Tuesday in Minnesota? Like, pick a lane.
But the weird part was that they asked NASA and all these scientists, could you guys just proofread this for us real quick? And they're all like,
And they said,
no. It's so far off. They were all like, no.
Okay, so really quick, I wanted to do a shout out to Movo for the UM6, which sounds fantastic and it's definitely improved the audio quality. I really like this because it plugs directly into my computer, and I can also hook it up to my soundboard if I want to. It's USB-C and XLR, which is great. So shout out to them. Link in the description for this episode, as well as on our social medias at It's a Classic Film Podcast. And then the other shout out, if you can see that light strip behind me, is from Feit Electric. It is their Smart Color Neon Flex LED rope. That one is super cool because it can change to any different color, and it can, like, the colors can chase themselves, or it can flash, it can go back and forth, and it's completely flexible. You can put it in basically any design you want. So that's another really cool thing that I've added to the studio. You guys can check us out on Instagram as well as YouTube and Spotify for these episodes. Yeah, come leave comments and rate us on Spotify, comments on YouTube, subscribe and whatnot. So we're excited that you guys are joining us with this. And we're going to keep doing movies because we think they're classics and we love them.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. It's been great. This has been a great movie to talk about.
Thank you so much for listening and joining us on this episode. If you guys like the show, check us out on YouTube and Instagram at It's a Classic Film Podcast. You can rate us on Spotify, which means a lot to us. Leave a comment on YouTube, subscribe, and reach out on Instagram and let us know what you guys think about the podcast and give us some movies that we can watch and review.